Right. So to achieve your best grades at university, you need to be able to demonstrate your learning skills and abilities in four main areas. First area is knowledge. Okay, so that's what you know, or key terms, defining things, explaining things. Second one is understanding and application. Third one is analysis and synthesis, which starts to look at your critical thinking skills. And the fourth is evaluation and judgment, which shows your skills to make basically an academic judgment. And to be able to do those four things, you need to be able to ask the right questions when you're being given that information in the first place. So whether that's you reading a textbook or sitting in a lecture hall, these are the key questions that you need to ask under each four of these categories. Okay. So the first one is for knowledge and recall, and to be able to demonstrate that to your lecturer, you need to be able to answer, describe or explain the main topic, theory, formula, concept, or case. So just your ability to provide a description, okay, of what the topic is, the theory of why it is, can get you marks. Secondly, define and explain the key terms used in this topic or theory. So often what happens is we're kind of in a lecture or reading the textbook and we come across a word that we haven't seen before. And we don't really want to take the time or effort to really understand it there and then. So we just kind of skip it. I would say never do that. Always throw that word into Google, find out what it means, but also look for its synonyms, which shows words that are like that word to help you understand the context of that word as well. There's going to be words that are only kind of specific to your degree discipline as well. So it might be a word that you've heard before, but actually in the context of your degree means something completely different. So you want to be aware of that as well. What impact did the theory, the formula, the concept, or the case have, right? And over what time frame? So when I say what impact, it could either be impact in terms of the wider body of knowledge. So sometimes we get these pieces that are known as kind of seminal research or kind of theories or concepts that literally change the way we see things, and we really want to be able to take note of those ones and the kind of ones that are quite important to the body of knowledge that we're learning. So that's a really important thing to take a note of as well if you're hearing that come through. The next one then is understanding and application. So when you're trying to demonstrate your understanding and application skills, three top questions that I think you should be able to answer off the bat of anything that you learn is, how can this topic, theory, formula, concept, or case be applied, right? And that's either applied to a set question, applied to solving a problem, or applied to a real world context. So you may, obviously, if you're learning about this in lectures, the first go-to would be, how can you apply this in a real world context? And if you're able just to apply it to another real world example or context or something that you've read or seen, that's a really powerful way to cement that information for you and to show and demonstrate your understanding. What are some of the intended outcomes of the content that you've learned, right? So if there's a theory being put forward, right, or even a piece of literature that's being put forward, what was it trying to do? What was it trying to achieve? We often don't think about that, right? Like the author of that theory or the author of that literature or the author of that case law, what was it that they were aiming for? What do they want to be done with it? And that's a really important thing to think about. Equally in the sciences, what was this scientific breakthrough trying to accomplish? And oftentimes you get science, kind of new science coming through that was trying to do one thing, but in their kind of testing of the hypothesis and the rest of it, found something completely different. But you want to know, what was the original intention of the author. That can be very useful in being able to communicate your understanding of the actual theory or topic. And then thirdly, what do other academic sources say about the effectiveness of topic, theory, formula, or concept. Now we're starting to go into the analysis and synthesis, but it's just a question that can help open up your mind, your thinking. And actually, if you look into your marking criteria, you should see that you're actually given marks for the kind of width and the breadth of information that you've been able to go over in order to come to the answer that you're coming to. So by looking at other academic sources, and I have used the word academic, not just sources, right? So we kind of want to be looking at other researchers, journals, if there's articles out there that's been published, studies that have been done that can support what we're learning about is really, 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 really powerful to know as well. And this is all going to form the bedrock so that when you do come to an assessment, you've got all the bases covered. Right, analysis and synthesis. So which parts of the main topic, theory, formula, concept, or case, and I'm saying all of those things because this could be applying to everything from a degree in maths or finance all the way to a degree in English or whatever it may be. So I'm trying to cover all bases, but what are the most important parts of what you've learned and why? Now, often your lecture, people think the lecture is where you're going to learn everything about the topic. No, it is only an hour, max maybe 2, unless you're doing some deep laboratory work, then it could go a bit longer. But in that, you're only going to be learning almost the highlights of a wide volume of information. So the starting point actually is whatever your lecturer is sharing is probably the most important part that they want you to be able to process in terms of your learning. So that's a good signal. Whatever's in that lecture is going to be highly important. But also going back to like the recommended reading list, and every lecture has or should have some recommended chapters that you can delve into or resources. I see more frequently there's like recommended videos or podcasts or whatever it may be. But try and find the most important parts of that specific topic. Okay. Key points, as it were. Then, what research has been undertaken that adds to the concept, so either supports or reinforces it or adds new knowledge to that information, or critiques it in some way, right? So the theory of knowing is, and I don't want to go into epistemology and ontology, but the theory of knowing is that nothing is 100% true. It's only, if we go into the sciences, that's verifiable through testing and hypothesis and so forth. If we go into the social sciences or the arts, it's about being able to perceive ways of knowing. But I go off track. Let's keep it straightforward. Let's keep it simple. What research has been undertaken that adds or critiques to what you've learned? And this could just be 1 or 2 different authors, but anything that you can find that says for and against is really useful and will be useful when it comes to being assessed on some knowledge. How valid and reliable is the research underpinning the evidence? So this is now us leading into evaluation and judgment, but your ability to actually say, well, how valid is this information anyway, right? And often this is going to be within the context of the question that you're given. So it's not just about getting things right or wrong. Sometimes it's about, well, what's the question in the first place? What are we trying to achieve here? And how valid and reliable is the information? You know, is it outdated? Is it good information, but it was like 20 years ago that we found this out? Was it before even the internet existed? Like, there's ways that you can start to critique the research that's being brought to the table. Thinking about time frames, you could think about knowledge. You know, this was before this finding happened, you know, in the canon of knowledge. It could be this is only limited to a certain area, a certain geography, a certain location. And actually it doesn't apply when you take it to another location. So there's lots of ways to start to analyze. One good framework that I really like to use was actually, it's out of like business frameworks, but it's called the PESTLE analysis. And it was something that I started to pick up from my own ways or frameworks to analyze information. So PESTLE stands for political, economical, societal, technological, legal, and environmental, right? I will say that one more time. So that's political for the P, economical, S for societal or social, right? T is for technological, L is for legal, and E is for environmental. And this theory was actually used to help businesses adapt to a changing world or contemporary environment. But actually, I started to use it just to help me analyze information of text. So when I would get to about this point, I would say, okay, what areas, whether it's politically, economically, societally, that could most impact the way we see the information that's been presented, right? So for example, it could be, and I'm just going to take an example from marketing. We could say, marketers, the most important thing that a marketer needs to do is to make sure that they have got people's email addresses, right? And that didn't exist 10 years ago, but that now is the most important thing so they can start a relationship with their customers. But then I can go through my pestle and say, oh, politically there's been a change, or legally there's been a change around GDPR laws. And that means you can't actually just take people's email addresses and send them tons of junk mail and email and stuff like that. And actually customers now frown upon that. So I would take that legislative change and say, however, there should be a consideration of GDPR laws and also society's perception of just being spammed in their email inbox. That's my analysis. And all I've done is I've looked at the framework and then I've gone into how that impacts the information that I'm presenting back to the lecturer. Hope that all makes sense. Right, let's go to evaluation. Evaluation and judgment. So evaluation and judgment now, the first and most important question I would say is, how important is the information, the knowledge, the topic, the theory, the formula, the concepts of the case in the context of the question itself, right? So often we're given in an exam or in a coursework a question and we're putting forward our answers, but we're never taking a moment to think about how important the answer that we've given is. And partially the marks that you're being given is to be able to show through the evidence how important your answer is, right? Or the research that you've come across to answer the question. So this is a bit of a kind of a layered way of thinking about it, but don't just think about your answer. Think about how important is that answer and be ready to justify the importance of your answer. Okay. Now, this is sometimes called cross-referencing or cross-citations, where you might put forward your answer, but then you also bring in all the research, all the citations that support the answer that you've given, just to show how important it is in what you're doing, right? What limitations are there in applying this knowledge or implying, what you're putting forward? So it's easy just to say, this is the answer, but sometimes you've got to think about what are the limits of your solution. Like, it doesn't matter what you're saying should be done, there's always going to be limitations. And your awareness of those limitations shows that you've got deeper learning skills, that you can actually understand what you're putting forward might not work because of X, or at least there should be a consideration because of Y, right? And bringing that into what you're demonstrating to your lecturer. What do you recommend or advise based on your findings? So this is a really powerful one. So I would say, and it's what I've started to tell my students, when they do get a coursework or an assignment or presentation, to really try and ascertain or try and figure out, is the purpose of the assignment to give information to a reader, to advise their readers, or to recommend something to their readers? Now, you can go to your lecturer and ask, is this to inform, advise, or recommend? Your lecturer might say all three, or they might say, really, I'm looking for the recommendation, or really, I just want the information at this stage to see that you know the information. But that's a really powerful question to ask before you even put pen to paper, right? So the information, if it's information, then you want to bring out more of that knowledge stuff, right? The description, the outline, the kind of the earlier questions I've said. If it's advisory, then we want to get more into the analysis and synthesis, okay, and the critical thinking. And if it's recommendations, we want to go hard on the evaluation and judgment. Okay. And remember, if especially if you're doing an essay or a report, any kind of written work, case study stuff, you want to put your conclusion. Your conclusion is ultimately your recommendation of what the reader should consider. And that's could only be, it might even just be 2 sentences, but in conclusion, based on what you've done, this is what you think the reader should most be aware of or cognizant of going forward. Look, I hope that's covered a lot of it. You might have to come back in the video, look at some of the questions, but I am going to put the questions, a kind of little PDF guide of the questions in a link below, so you can access that for yourself. And look, I hope that you do your absolute best this academic year, and I'm wishing you all the best in your degree. All right, thank you.